Hello and welcome to the Opportunity Talks, powered by the EPFL Future Leaders platform. In each episode, we bring you conversations with cutting-edge innovators, disruptors, and dreamers who dare to go off the beaten path and drive meaningful change. In this episode, Laura has a conversation about next-generation challenges with Nick De Leon, board trustee at Design for Good and head of knowledge exchange and partnerships at the Royal College of Art.
Hello, Nick. Thank you very much for joining today with the Opportunity Talks. And to begin with, it would be great to know more about you and who you are.
Yes, I've been 15 years now at the Royal College of Art, and most recently I had set up the service design program there about a decade ago. And then in very, very recent times, I've been running some of the large-scale project activities we have, including one with our King, Charles III, and Sir Johnny Ive, which is called the Terracotta Design Lab. And that looks at very much kind of mission-led innovation using design in order to address some of the biggest challenges that we face. But it didn't always begin there. I have a background which also involves engineering, business, as well as the worlds of technology.
Thank you very much, Nick. I guess it would be great to hear about your activities at RC are really at the bridge between this pushing innovation, develop innovation that of course could be about technologies, new businesses and services, of course, new type of kind of approaches, but also related to big challenges. And then if you maybe talk about that and then the relationship of design and challenges, but also businesses, that would be kind of amazing.
Well, my introduction to the world of business, let me just add a little bit more to that. I decided to become an engineer when I was inspired by the Apollo missions in the late 60s, early 70s, by Concorde taking off in 1968, feeling that in that period, the world was going to be transformed. I studied engineering at Imperial College London and then discovered just across the road was the Royal College of Art, which was a place of design. And they were just eager at that time to try a few physicists and engineers to see what might happen. And as a result of that, I studied industrial design and went on to join IBM, initially as a designer, but then getting much deeper into the R&D side. And then, to my surprise, into the business side. And I said it was to my surprise because actually, I never really thought of myself in the world of business and commerce. I thought the world of academia was interesting. The world of design was even more fascinating. And the world that I was in an R&D lab was exciting enough. But somehow, business as well started to attract me. And I think this is an important lesson, I think, for many designers, that if you want to see your designs taken up by industry, if you want, as an engineer, to see your innovations attract investment, either by the companies that employ you or by others, you need to understand how it creates value and how value can be captured as a result of that. So that was my kind of introduction into the world of engineering, design, and business. And I was fortunate enough through my career to enjoy moving fairly effortlessly, not just through each of those as though it was a sequence, but weaving them together into a fabric of innovation where design, technology, and business are equal partners in being able to serve the needs of communities and people.
I want to really build up on this last point that you just said, because the Imperial College of London and the Royal College of Art in London, they are quite neighbor. It's the combination, I guess, between this science and engineering and design is quite also physically there. But I guess there is a bigger picture around that. I mean, there's a history around this idea of science and society related to why the Imperial, why the RCI in the specific area that actually are quite relevant to the disciplines.
Well, yes, and it's a story that goes back some 180 years to the Prince Consort, Prince Albert, who was married to Queen Victoria. He had come from Germany, and he had a singular vision that had been informed by
science and engineering and design is quite also physically there. But I guess there is a bigger picture around that. I mean, there's a history around this idea of science and society related to why the Imperial, why the RCI in the specific area that actually are quite relevant to the disciplines. and intersection.
Well, yes, and it's a story that goes back some 180 years to the Prince Consort, Prince Albert, who was married to Queen Victoria. He had come from Germany, and he had a singular vision that had been informed by well, there was Werner von Siemens and Emil Rathenau from AEG, but it was also informed by, prior to that, Wilhelm von Humboldt, who was the brother of Alexander Humboldt, who'd founded in Germany this kind of combination of industry connected with the arts and sciences to education and academia. And this combination that happened in Berlin, he'd seen the value of that and how it had transformed German industry, and felt that Britain also ought to have that. And that led to the Great Exhibition of 1851, which was really to bring together the works of industry, arts, and scientists for the fulfillment of all nations. And that was the essence of the 1851 Great Exhibition. And that, amazingly, the Royal Commission that set that up still exists today. And I'm fortunate enough to be a member of the commission as well. And what is so astonishing in this small area that's 30 acres, so about 15 hectares, 12 hectares actually, I think. In that small space, you have Imperial College, which is one of the, maybe the top institutions of science and engineering and technology in the world. You've got the Royal College of Art, #1 institute of art and design in the world, the #1 music conservatoire, the Royal Academy of Music. You have the Royal Geographic Society, from which more and countless exhibitions have started. And in addition to that, you have 3 world-class museums. I mean, it's a tiny space, some 600 meters by 600 meters, but in that space, you have this most incredible environment, which is a kind of hothouse of interdisciplinary innovation. Now, my reflection is that I was very fortunate to be able to walk across what is called Prince Consort Road from Imperial to the Royal College of Art, as well as across Exhibition Road that would take me to the museums, and along that to the Royal Geographic Society. And of course, I was fortunate to do that, but we live in a world where we tend to have separated up all of the different disciplines. And we've kind of marooned them all. So we're kind of an archipelago of minute disciplines instead of a great continent of knowledge where people are allowed to move freely. Well, in South Kensington, we've got at least the conditions for that. With the RCA, Imperial College, the Royal Geographic, the great museums that we have. And we even commemorate that around the frieze on the Royal Albert Hall, which explains this kind of great desire of Prince Albert to ensure that the arts and sciences were combined for the good of all nations, and that this should be an embodiment of that. So, there's a lot of history around this, which also I think is very relevant today, because we're seeing that so many of the great kind of technological advances need to be really connected to create a virtuous collision with society and culture, not one that's a car crash. And so often we're seeing with a lot of technology, either the technology entrepreneurs don't quite achieve their goals and many of those enterprises fail, or if they do succeed, they may succeed at some cost to our environment or our society. And, we need to have things that are, and inventions that are really in harmony with people, planet, and nature. And I think, it's not a bad place to start in South Kensington to try and achieve that goal.
I think it's quite inspiring to hear the story that the concept of somehow interdisciplinarity was already there, because the physical space that the different type of disciplines occupied and the different connections and expertise actually kind of was created, was literally the platform that was there, and also to see how those were connected to each other, but how unfortunately, like in with history, somehow those connections were lost, and then this idea of research became a little bit more insular, and then the relationship with the industry and academia. So I think this powerful connection that were provided to the researcher, to the academics at the time, somehow like were lost, and now we find again in a need to have those again connected. And I think it kind of really nice to relate to the things you wish to have and the things you would love to do, but also the opportunity that you should have. Like maybe like I can talk also more about this connection, why we need like the thing you love supposed to be very important, also like related to the research you do.
Well, I think there are a couple of differences in terms of the big imperatives of each of the eras we're talking about. We're not talking about the same world 150 years ago that we're talking about now. The imperatives for action and for industry were different. That was the era of colonialism, of empire, of competition between nations to seize resources and others. Hopefully, and one would hope, as we're recording this, as COP28 comes to a close, that we're taking a look at some imperatives which are for the good of all mankind. You know, I'm reminded that with 26 years to go before 2050, if we look at the number of working days there are typically 225 working days per year. Well, multiply 26 by 225 and you get about 5,900. Now, 5,900 working days to 2050. If you're in your 20s right now and you're looking at 2050, you're going to be in your perhaps early 50s, late 40s at that point. So as you're listening to this, you might be thinking, I'll be at the zenith of my career at that point. Well, it's only, 5,900 working days to go. If you had 5,900 Swiss francs, euros, pounds, dollars, doesn't really matter. And it was there to last you until next June. You'd watch every single pound, euro, dollar, Swiss franc that you'd spend. And you do it because you knew that it would matter. We cannot keep borrowing against the future. We have to start fixing it, and we have to start fixing it very fast. So there is an imperative that says, at this point in time, we have some of the biggest issues that we'll ever have. But at the same time, we also are in a perfect storm of technology. About every 60 years, according to Kondratiev, a Russian economist, we would see a great inflection of new technologies and a great surge of change that would take place. And you can see that in the 1960s, we had nuclear power, we had the information technology revolution, we had a kind of data communications. All of these things were transforming the way, and the aerospace industries were blasting off literally to the moon. So, and then we go back another 60 years and you see the kind of birth of the motor car, the airplane, electricity being, electrical grids being installed in cities from Berlin to Tasmania. You had telecommunications. Most middle-class homes by 1900 had a telephone. Extraordinary. Go back another 60 years, the 1840s, it's the world of rapid industrialization, the steam engine, the railways. And again, you can see the birth of the Industrial Revolution 60 years earlier than that. So you've had these 60-year cycle, which interestingly means that today we have a perfect storm of technology as well. And we're seeing this. I started my career in the 1970s when computers went online. That was a big thing, from batch to data. A decade later, we had the PC, and it took industry a decade to come to terms with the personal computer. And then another 10 years took us to the internet, and then another 10 years, and we went all Wi-Fi and distributed and could unplug our laptops from the networks, and we could distribute work almost anywhere. But today, as we know, in this era, not simply of smartphones, but of AI, of robotics, of AR, VR, of blockchain, of cloud computing, of social computing. We've got about 5 or 6 new technologies that have appeared in one decade. This is evidence of this kind of wave of transition. And these waves of transition are typically followed by, within a decade, a social and cultural revolution. You can think of what happened in the late 60s. It would have been impossible to imagine the era of hippies and rock and roll and all the rest of it if you were in the era of the 1950s, or the enfant terrible of the 1920s, and all the birth of modernism that happened, previously, or the revolutions that took place, including the French Revolution, earlier. So you can see the revolutions, the kind of social, cultural revolutions from May 68 in Paris to the revolutions of 1848, all going on the back of this technological and massive cultural change that takes place. And we're in the middle of that now. That means these disciplines need to come together, because we have an explosion, a perfect storm of most miraculous new technologies and capabilities, but a perfect storm of problems. And as designers and engineers and as business people, we have to look at this as an imperative to bring our competencies together for change, to really focus on what we can do personally to contribute to that, and do the things that the world needs, not just things we love to do, but the things the world needs.
I guess I want to kind of build on this point, because I'm bringing back to something you mentioned earlier, because the world needs specific activities, and also like we produce, so sometimes we are not really much aligned with what the need would be and what we actually do, and then in this type of dynamics, there is also the idea of the economy and businesses and growth, and then we forgot about everything else, I guess. But if we think about the idea of kind of business, at the heart of business is the concept of value, but then there is a conversation within what could be the value that we create. You mentioned earlier this, like kind of the value that we create and the value we capture. So it would be interesting for you to expand on this specific context and concept here.
Well, let me expand on 2 aspects of that. The first is this concept of the creation of value and the capture of value. And I think it's a very interesting one to look at different types of business and different types of organization, and also look at it at a personal level as well. There are businesses that have the capacity to create value. There are businesses that are also really good at capturing value for them and for their shareholders as well. Sometimes the balance doesn't seem to be quite right. One could look at certain sectors, let's say financial services, and see financial services as the essential, has the capacity to kind of lubricate the economy by providing liquidity, providing capability. But the value is created by the enterprises that are the beneficiaries of that. Now, if the banking system seems to be capturing more value than it's creating, then that can be problematic. If we're looking at any business, we need to look at what is its capacity to create value and what is its capacity to capture that value. There are many businesses that fail because they're able to create value briefly and then they didn't figure out how to capture it, so they go out of business. Now, that's a terrible waste. So if they could only really consider how to put an effective business model together and a business plan together, then they'd be able to both create value, but also capture it. There are other businesses that become very good at capturing value without perhaps creating that much. And I think as designers and engineers, we have to constantly be looking at this kind of combination. What is the value I'm creating and for whom? What is the value that is being captured by the enterprise to make sure that it is economically sustainable? What is the business model around my innovation? And the innovation might be all about sustainability, but that will make it economically sustainable so that it's worth doing. Now, that's not enough in itself, coming back to purpose and meaning. And I'm reminded of both the Japanese and Korean expression, which is used, which is ikigai. Ikigai looks at 4 particular indicators. The first is, what do I love doing? Because we should, if we possibly can, do the things we love to do. What can I do well? Sometimes there are things we love to do. I mean, I love cooking, but I'm not sure I'm that good at it. But what are we good at as well? The next is, what can I get paid for? Well, I certainly couldn't get paid for doing my cooking. But there are many people whose profession they can get well paid for, but that perhaps they don't love doing. And perhaps they might not even be very good at it, but they can get paid for it. And then there is a fourth and essential one. What does the world need? So if we put these together, what am I good at doing? What do I love doing? What can I be paid for? And what does the world need? If you're missing any one of those elements, then something is a little incomplete. People who are good at doing what they do and can get paid for it, well, that's a profession. People who are good at doing what they do and love what they're doing, well, that's a vocation. People who are good at all three, but it's not what the world needs, might end up at some point in their lives thinking, what was this all about? That sense of kind of uselessness. I did all of this. I loved doing it. I got paid for it well, but did I contribute to the world getting a bit messier, a bit more divided? Or did I do something that was in harmony with it? And I think we should be looking at this, at all 4 of those, and asking those questions of ourselves. Do I love it? Am I good at it? Do I get paid for it? And is it what the world needs? And not just as individuals. I think it's something that we can look at as well and say, right, what is my enterprise doing? What do we love doing collectively? Are we good at doing that? Or maybe we're not the best in class at it. Can the business sustain itself and grow because its customers value what it's creating? And does the world need it? And I come back to this point I made earlier about this very arbitrary date of 2050. But the world's on fire. We're roasting it. We're making it dirtier. We're making it more divided. We are facing the 6th great extinction of species right now as a consequence of what we're doing. And therefore, do we want to be making it a little bit better? And every choice we make, we have to make that choice. So what does the world need right now should be the dominant force, I believe, in looking at this. And that then relates back to value. When we talk of value, we have to have a model of prosperity that is in harmony with people, planet, and nature. That's the kind of work we do with the Terracotta Design Lab at the Royal College of Art, that's now also taking place at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, the National Institute of Design in India, and Dubai Institute of Design Innovation as well. We're all working towards trying to address these issues and the grandest challenges of our day. It's the work we're doing with the United Nations around design for good, and 12 major global corporations who are partnering with us, with nearly 1,000 designers between them, a turnover of 2 trillion, basically using the power of enterprise to focus on trying to tackle these issues, not because of greenwash and PR, but because if there isn't a world that will exist in the future, there's no point in driving growth because there'll be nothing to grow into. We're exhausting a tiny little plant pot of soil as we try and grow an oak tree. No, it doesn't work that way. If we want to do it, we've got to make sure we look at all the other forces that are part of this. And that's the role of the designer, entrepreneur, engineer, technologist that has to take all of those aspects into account.
I guess, thank you for explaining this. I guess, if I'm introduced, I'm now putting a few keywords in the conversation and tease you, I guess, because if I come back to this idea of science, engineering, creative art as a service for society, the idea of technology innovation, the idea of value and growth, So where do you think, and then academic research, and this idea that, of course, in academia, there is new technology that is produced, there is kind of new knowledge that is produced. How will you kind of join those dots in terms of how will you kind of think and see that this connection with society, as Prince Albert did kind of in the 19th century, will happen now in this kind of major kind of hurricane that we are under in terms of kind of the different challenges we're facing and what you actually described. Where do you think this transition can happen? How we can be back all together?
Yeah. Well, look, I think there are a number of very interesting points that you've just made there. And the most, the key figure for me is 25 to 28 years. That's the time it takes for scientific innovation to be able to move from being an idea in a laboratory, that perhaps the first experiment has taken place, and large-scale deployment at a level where it's able to make impact. Now, coming back to my figure of 26 years, that means anything that's in a lab today may not be having large-scale impact until 2050. Now, you could say, well, that means we better sweat all the technologies we've got. And that is a very good point. We've got to make use of what have we got already, and how can we accelerate what already exists to be able to deliver impact. But it also means we need another model of innovation, and a model of innovation that looks at some of these wicked problems that we're facing collectively, and says, what can we do in terms of the scientific innovations and accelerate that through? What are the reasons why it takes so long? And one of the big reasons is that things move very swiftly at a university to the point of getting to a basic proof of concept, but they don't accelerate much further than that, because often it takes very large levels of investment to be able to do it. And it's also a very risky phase. It might be that you invest in a technology which is actually an essential component of a larger system, but the rest of the system's not in place or likely to be in place for too long. So you have to kind of wait for other elements to be invented as part of it. So I'm actually fortunate to be part of something called the Wicked Acceleration Lab, which is a kind of joint venture between Imperial and the Royal College of Art and a number of major corporates that have weighed in as part of it, and as well as other organizations like the World Economic Forum that are part of the Wicked Acceleration Lab. Now, the Wicked Acceleration Lab looks at the cycle and says, look, if I've got some scientific novelty, a new way of addressing something, how can I translate that into some kind of technological capability? How can I take that technological capability and transform it into functional value? How can I take that functional value and combine it with other components to create systems value? Because these wicked problems will require a systemic response. How do I take that systemic capability or systemic value and turn it into user value? So it's valuable to organizations. Is it about mobility? Is it about sequestering? Is it about energy transition? Is it about sequestering carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? Whatever it might be. But it may be a part of and require other systems components. But essentially, it creates kind of user value, that user being a government, a corporation, an individual. As part of it. How do I turn the user value and turn into business value, and therefore am able to generate investment and returns that will allow growth? Now, if I can bring that business value and make clear the business value I can create early on in the cycle, I can raise finance faster. If I can tie it by being able to demonstrate this will be the essential component that completes the system of something that's already well understood, I can unlock the value that's there. If I'm able to show new levels of user value, and again, that can be in a range of sectors where government investment, corporations recognize the requirements for it, are, just absolutely eager to get their hands on. If I can do all of those components, I can again bring forward investment. So this cycle can be accelerated and taken down from 25, 28 years, can be pulled right the way back into a decade or less as a consequence. Now, we are trying to pioneer new models for that with the Wicked Acceleration Lab, and working with industry, working with the organizations that are, and governmental organizations that are very much part of this as well, to try and accelerate that. And to me, it's this model of understanding, if I've got something that's originated in academia, the speed at which I can translate that into technological capability, functional value, systems value, user value, business value, and then raise finance, because of all of those elements are clear in the first few years, not having to wait 20 years to demonstrate that. Then I can use this technological capability, which is so astonishing that we have right now, to tackle some of these biggest issues. And that is when we talk about this, the designer has an essential role to play. And that role is about being able to envision how value can be created, but not stop there. Designers also have to be a little bit more entrepreneurial as well, understand how business models can be made sustainable, and to have as much innovation in the business model, perhaps sometimes, as in the product or service they're creating. And it's that combination, I think, that is going to, if we can harness those things, we can certainly make our world a much better world by 2050. And remember, it's only 5,900 and something working days away.
That's brilliant indeed. Like, I would like to kind of ask a question which that really kind of trigger my curiosity, because you use the word imagine what could be the business, imagine what you can do. And I guess what you just described is brilliant, because it really captures the difficulty, the hurdles, if you are working on something quite great and in technology and in research, something that could make potentially a big impact. But what is very daunting, this idea of how mentioned about delays of time, things can take kind of not the time that you wish to have. But now I come with a question, like, if you are like, given your experience on this and even what you just described, what do you would recommend to a young researcher developing a kind of like practitioner, engineer, and designer that is developing something that could be very much potential, that has the potential to change? What you would recommend? How can I make it as something that can make impact, physical impact, for a business, for an economic model? Like, what do you think could be done?
So three really important things. The first is to remember you don't have to invent everything yourself. Focus on the collective imagination, bring together a community of people with different capabilities and backgrounds. I think often I say to my own students and to designers who are very senior designers in business as well, just become the midwife to other people's ideas. You don't have to conceive the child. You have to actually work with others and nurture, bring that idea into the world and nurture it. The second thing I would say is, don't fall in love with a solution. Fall in love with a problem that needs to be solved. Absolutely. If you fall in love with a solution, you will end up chasing problems for it to resolve rather than the other way around. So fall in love with the problem, not the solution, and make sure you understand the root causes, because those root causes will be systemic in nature. The third is that I've worked across a range of different disciplines, and the most important thing I've found about working across disciplines is to have empathy, not only with the ultimate end users of the solution that you have in mind. We talk about design as key skill is empathy. Understand humanity, the people that you're designing for. Well, it's not enough to have empathy only with them. One needs to have empathy with all the other disciplines, the different epistemologies and ontologies of those disciplines hold dear to them, so that one can engage as part of that. This kind of empathy that enables teams to come together, to have empathy with the context and the nature in which your innovation is to be deployed and executed when it goes into the field, either as a service or a product. To have So this sense of being open-minded, empathic, ready to embrace novelty, understanding why others might find that more challenging. That to me is an essential skill and competence. So just in summary, don't do it on your own. You won't get there. Number two, fall in love with the problem, not the solution that you've got. Be ready to scrap different solutions if they don't serve that problem well. And thirdly, be empathic, not only with the ultimate end users who you're trying to create value for, but all the other people in that kind of network of value creation that you're going to be working with, and the different disciplines that will entertain different epistemologies and different ontologies, and that is an essential element for innovators. I could say there's a fourth one in a way, which is, we know at the Royal College of Art, we're very fortunate to have a most fantastic business incubator inside the college. They've launched some 80 enterprises from the RCA over the last decade or so. It's got a success rate that is right up with the very top business incubators. Those businesses are worth hundreds of millions of pounds now. I think it's nearly $500 million, from enterprises. This is at the Royal College of Art, goodness sake. So if you're listening to this in another institution, you might think of yourself as saying, well, if the RCA can do this, what can we do?
I think you're saying something very true. I mean, this combination of having you as a person in education that is developing and constructing the future through your creativity, your ideas, and collaborating with others, and the combination having this opportunity to have some help, support, mentoring, as you mentioned, the connection between the Innovation RCA and then in RCA, but also, like, for instance, at PFL, there is a vice president for innovation as well, and having this idea of building business within, as a journey within academia, that you, as in education, I guess is quite relevant and important, especially for what we've been discussing, the perfect storm we are in at the moment. But I guess, like, as a kind of a final point of this conversation, something that I would like to really ask as a kind of last point, it really kind of comes back to this idea that we discussed about being interdisciplinary, work across disciplines. Think about, the idea to be in love with a problem is very important, and also the idea to imagine the future, like, in a different way. And this is where I would like to stop as a last question. Is like this idea of the future that is so daunting, and then we think of how we can get there, and then the future is closer to us. What do you recommend? How do you think we should think about the future through like innovation, technology, and science and design and everything all combining together?
That's quite a big question. I think we might have to start all over again on that one. Let me just summarize it, though, very, very simply again from my perspective. My own imagination is quite limited. The collective imagination is much greater. And so draw on the collective imagination. For those people studying engineering and design, we've recently created a website called The Empathetic Engineer, and it's not to try and teach engineers all about design. It's getting engineers to apply a kind of much more human-centered, or might I even call it life-centered approach to the way that they design as part of it. So work across disciplines, again, as part of that. With the vision of the future, it does rely on imagination. But also, in my case, my mother used to describe me as a little boy. I was almost pathologically optimistic. I was always smiling and cheerful. I think she might have even warned my wife, it can get you down sometimes. He's a bit too cheery. But it's kind of been okay. I'm hugely optimistic about our future. I am not filled with doom and gloom about it, because I see a generation that is absolutely passionate about their world and passionate about building a better society. I see them ready to not only talk about it, but act on it. not only be activists, but actually do those things that are necessary to achieve those goals. I also think that the technological revolution that's happening, we're not going to be solved by technology, but we're going to be, the world is going to benefit from these tremendous new capabilities that technology has to offer, but it needs empathetic engineers. It needs business people who put humanity and value creation, not just value capture, at the core of what they do. And I don't think you have to be that optimistic to think that that is a real possibility. And our world can be a better world as a consequence. The one final thing I would add is that, I've started my career in the 1970s. So you can figure out my age. Multiply my age by 30. There are only 30 lifetimes between now and year zero, before when Jesus Christ walked the planet and Rome was at its zenith. Go back 100 of my lifetimes, and you have the great city of Ur, the kind of seminal city from which all civilization can be considered to have evolved. Now, 100 lifetimes ago, that's not much. So we, in what we call civilization, we're just the first pathfinders. If we were mayflies, we'd be over in 100 days. It's nothing. We're the ones, though, we have a special privilege. We are the pioneers for civilized humanity. And we will set a trajectory, and it's very incumbent on us to make sure we're not bad ancestors and set the trajectory at the wrong angle. Let's try and soar as a result of this and fly somewhere special and make sure that people look back on us as not being the bad ancestors, but the good ones, the ones who saw what needed to be done and took the first steps to doing it.
Thank you very much. It's a very great way to conclude today's podcast with this idea of, yes, the future might be complex, but with a positive attitude, things are not really that far. And as you say, that's the optimist aspect. It's not that even impossible. This is something that collectively, by working with this collective imagination, as I kind of mentioned, it would be something that for us to construct, as you say, 100 lifetime in the future would be something that is not that far, but actually that there is a scale of skills and lives that they can collectively do something. So thank you very much for all this, especially for concluding in such a positive way, because, not hope is good, but I guess a hope that is practical is better. So there is a possibility there. So thank you very much, Nick.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Laura. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Opportunity Talks, powered by the EPFL Future Leaders platform. For more information, please visit futureleaders.tools.